So if from that introduction I sounded like a bureaucrat who doesn't know much, that's just about right where we wanted to set the bar. That's kind of expectation that I'd like to set, because we actually do have someone around here who knows a bit more than I do, Jody. I described myself to him when I was asked if I might come over here as someone who's a bit more of a BIM enthusiast than a BIM expert. So I've had some exposure to it, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what our vision is as a department nationally. And you know, I'm going to tell you straight up, I'm a little bit awkward about this, because I feel like I'm telling the room here that we get that BIM's a good thing. So that probably won't be revolutionary to any of you, but listen to it if you will, in terms of here's sort of where we've come to, and perhaps it's taken us longer than it's taken you to get there, but I guess the good news in that would be it looks like we're getting there. So I'll just dive right in then. So who are we? Well, we are Public Works and Government Services Canada. No, I mean Public Services and Procurement Canada. It's the same thing. We renamed ourselves about 2 years ago, but most people who have been in the business for a while might know us as Public Works. So we have this vision, and we have this mission, and we have this mandate that focuses on real property. And this is kind of, well, I hope it's not irrelevant. I hope it's useful still today, but it's not necessarily very updated for the digital world. So we would see that shifting a bit probably as we move more into a digitally enabled world. So excel in operations, government operations digitally, and that's plainly, as you'll know, that's something pretty different than where we had traditionally been, which was pretty intensely paper-based. So what does that mean in terms of a mission? It means leadership. It means showing what it means to try to move, even if we're trying to show leadership in catching up to where some of the industry is moving. That's kind of what it's about for us. We're changing the way we work. We're changing the way that we deliver services. We still want to be sound stewards. If we're throwing money around and we're not taking good care of things, we're kind of failing on sort of our most basic level. And we want to do that with a certain degree of excellence and expertise. Because some of the stuff that we manage, as you'll imagine, some of it is a little bit complex. So it was our team. Transport Canada owns the Confederation Bridge, if you will. But it was our team that was the engineering that helped build that. So we've got expertise is sort of core to our value. But it's shifting in a digitally enabled world. So why now? Well, why haven't we done it before now might be a better question in some regards. The answer's not totally straightforward, but there are some changes in government thinking and business approaches that have occurred a bit over time. And I guess what I would point to is in 2008, BIM, it was not a strong corporate real estate tool from our perspective. It had some clear uses, but large portfolio owners had not really worked with the technology long enough to establish definitive and effective life cycle workflows that integrated technology with our ways of doing business. So large-scale management versus doing a project. And then 2009, of course, saw a significant economic downturn, and we were kind of focused on delivering initially a first round of infrastructure projects instead of trying to change up the way that we do business. So that really wasn't the time to sort of revolutionize. That was the time to stand and deliver with the resources that we had. But since then, we recognize BIM's come a long way, and large real property owners like us around the world, they've begun to pave the way, and we're noticing. So a couple of other things that I would note there is that policies had not really supported fully an RP-specific digital transformation. Internal knowledgeable resources that we can tap into in our system. There used to be this, one person who was like the enthusiastic person, the future is now, we can do really cool things, pay attention to me. Now there are more of those people around in the system, and that really enables us to start doing more. People coming out of really sort of forward-leaning college programs like what you folks are working at here. The federal government's real estate model has changed from a more traditional model to a more corporate approach, and we're trying to manage information better in order to manage our resources more productively and efficiently and sustainably over the long term. Large recap programs, they require efficient and effective services, and large things like the Energy Services Acquisition Project inside Ottawa. So that's a massive district energy system. It's going to be one of the largest greening projects the Government of Canada has. All the central heating plants in Ottawa, federally, through the downtown and Gatineau, are connected into a bit of a network. And that's a massive amount of technology, and a lot of it is really, really old. So updating that through a large number of buildings, like that's a big undertaking. And you want to be going about that in a modern way. So the modernization itself should be done in a smart and modern way. So things like this are sort of driving us to change our thinking. Probably the thing that's pushing us the most is some of our large campus projects, and the one that I would point to is the place where I was last, which is the Parliamentary Precinct. So anyone who's been to Ottawa, Gatineau, almost in the last 10 years, has seen the tower cranes around Parliament Hill. So we've literally disassembled some of the old buildings and rebuilt them entirely. In the case of West Block that will open fairly soon, we went from one basically crawl space to 3 or 4 levels of sub-basement excavated. So like radical, profound changes to make these old buildings new again and functional in the modern world. So you can imagine what the IT infrastructure looked like in these buildings when we started, or the HVAC, or the plumbing, or the sprinklers, or any of that, right? It was pretty basic, to say the least. But to bring them into the 21st century, the other analogy that I'm familiar with is, if you look at the shipbuilding industry, you have to haul a lot of wires through a lot of conduits. So it's a super densely packed construction challenge. And we see the same things in some of our most complex modern buildings that have to blend functionality, security, and all sorts of things like that. So on Parliament Hill, the complexity of the work that we're doing, taking these beautiful heritage old buildings, that's pushing us really hard towards smarter ways of modeling instead of trying to draw it and make some adjustments as we go along. So there is a policy renewal going on, and it does give us an opportunity to rethink. The current framework of policies, based on the traditional drawing-centric approach to real property management, it leaves a fundamental gap between the way we manage property and assets and the way we manage our information. So if we actually want to achieve the kind of commitments that we started to make on greening and heritage and just modernization in general, we've got to leverage digital information better to make decision-making better. To achieve this, we're working with the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. They're the people who make the rules, all of the policies on how the Government of Canada has to manage its business, including in information technology, to try to, and governing real property as well and assets. So we're working with them to try to bring the policy suite, the guidance and directions a little bit more aligned with what our requirements are for a modern world. And it's a pretty effective partnership. But until we do that, that can be limiting. So why is it complex and important? This would be awkward moment number 1. Why is doing things in government complex? Integrated digital management across the top, I guess that's a little bit more of a goal. But if you take a look at the gray in the second row, you'll see the way that right now we manage our programs of work. So we take a look at managing a portfolio, and we also do some management of projects. We've got some specific efforts on climate change. We've got a heritage program, and then we've got just day-to-day operations, so running it. On the layer below that in red, you'll see, you can see the missing workflows and systems that BIM can actually, in the third row you'll see gray systems and workflows that we have in place in a standardized way. So note that there are more things in red than there are in gray. Gray is what we've got. In red, what you'll see are the missing workflows and systems where we could actually lean on BIM to create a digitally enabled management regime for real property. So until now, the workflows in red, those are either paper-based or they're inconsistent, or, and I feel like I'm telling tales out of school, not done at all in some cases. And those things actually obviously have impacts on how you manage your assets over their life cycle. It's not the best way to be doing it, but it's kind of what we can manage over the years with the technology and work processes that we had. BIM for us offers us the chance to shift all of that, and that's what's probably the most exciting about it. So what does it mean for us as we look at managing real property as a corporate real estate manager? Well, one of the largest benefits documented globally is the savings. We look to sort of a 20% reduction in savings. The UK, they saw 280 million pounds worth of savings. Like, the numbers are pretty stunning if you look at what your capital expenditures are. On an average real property project, we see that we can go over budget up to 20% of the time, or over schedule similarly, and we can fall prey to a lot of change orders on projects that are managed in an old school way. Now, I'm glad to say that doesn't happen all of the time. I'll be looking for a new job shortly if it does, but sometimes it does, and of course BIM is one of the things that will enable us to do a whole lot less of that. Plan in crazy detail up front and know what you're doing before you get into it. Another well-documented benefit of transformation is improvement of collaboration, including long-distance collaboration, because a lot of the people who we work with on projects aren't necessarily sitting in the room with you at the time. As you bring in sort of more of a, I don't know if I could say like a globalized industry, or at least a nationalized industry, or even a regionalized industry, if you're not all sitting in the same office, having better access to information shared in real time, it just enables collaboration a whole lot better. Information loss. This was a huge issue for me in my last job, which was operations in the Parliamentary Precinct. So we have these massive projects, buildings, like massively complex new buildings that we're bringing online, and there's tons and tons of documentation, outrageous amounts of documentation. Well, if you lose that information, if you don't have a good way of integrating and managing it, you've got a beautiful new project that turns into a building that you start to run into the ground, in whole or in part, if you're not managing it carefully. So actually having a managed, integrated building information system based on BIM is pretty helpful. Going digital, it means that the federal community can join the international construction economy in a more competitive way, and we can improve skilled employment. A 43% uptick of that kind of skilled uplift inside the United Kingdom. The federal community can actually do things around security of information. So if and as we move down this road, we look at it as an opportunity to start taking advantage of, blockchain technologies, right? A lot of the financial institutions are using this, but it doesn't matter what the application is. It's the modern world's way of managing and securing a huge amount of information in different contexts. So whether that's the plan, it can be basically plans to your building, I say in old speak in some ways, or actually managing the building control systems themselves. Community connectivity and collaboration means that information can be shared and borrowed across levels of government, which is something that we see as, I guess, increasingly important. There's one of my old bosses used to say, there's lots of different governments, but there's only one taxpayer, and never forget that. So when governments can work together to do smarter things, you may wind up operating a little bit more efficiently collectively. So better information sharing for us is something that we see as a lot of potential. If we can work with our systems and our approaches and our technologies in a combined way, we can learn from each other and do better together. It also means, if we move down this road more so, we see it as an opportunity to fulfill some of the promises the government has made around open data. So on one hand, it's security and making sure that the stuff that we want to keep secure is secure, but on the other hand, it's truly open sharing of the kind of stuff that should be openly shared. We can begin to accurately simulate and forecast what's going to happen, not just in the building level, but in the portfolio level as we start to see climate shifting. So one of the things that we're looking at, again, if I look at something like the Centre Block project, so the main building on Parliament Hill with the Peace Tower on it, what happens when the freeze-thaw cycles shift and the precipitation levels change such that we're going to have a whole lot more icing on that building? We know that that's a real thing. So if, as we're doing smarter, forward-looking design, how do we start integrating the modeling with the design to come up with approaches that are going to respect heritage but make the building more resilient to some of the changes that are coming at us over the next, quite predictably, over the next 30 years. Beyond that, we're less confident. So there's a couple of stats, because it's not a good government presentation if you don't have a slide with a bunch of stats on it. Basically what this says is we've got a lot of buildings. A lot of them are quite large. And we've got a lot of clients too. So 99, we'll call it 100. 100 different departments and agencies who lean on us for space. So we're basically managing the portfolio on their behalf. It's a pretty large portfolio. So we've got some numbers in there, as you can see, under the billions in terms of management for the volume of work. We've got a lot of projects. The projects are worth $250 million. And those are for 50 different clients. So they're not just our own projects either. So when you're trying to manage that much all across the country, almost 1,600 locations across the country, and you're trying to do it in a sustained, sustainable, planned, controlled, managed way, having really good real-time digital information to make smarter decisions, it's pretty darn helpful. So internationally, there's certain drivers. There's an average of 0.1% investment in R&D for real property specifically. 20% of projects, we believe, are completed late from the research that we see. 80% of projects fall prey to capital cost overruns. And both time and cost overruns, they impact 20% of the overall cost of an asset, while 80% of those costs wind up rolling downfield into the operations and maintenance phase. So what that all adds up to is it gets pretty expensive if you're not managing it as well as you can. And we're pretty big on trying to do better on climate change. Canada is a top 10 country in terms of contributing to climate change. That would be in the bad way, not in contributing to fighting climate change, but in contributing to climate change. So better work there is important, but real property is one of the top 3 sectors that's contributing to it in Canada. So our infrastructure is actually a very important part, right after, I believe, it's oil and gas and the transportation sector. So we are a big part of the solution. We need to be a big part of the solution as we get to a solution. So some notes here on UK achievements. After investing £5 million, after a $5 million annual investment in the UK, so 25 million or 40 of our dollars, they've started to see average annual cost savings of around 280 million pounds. So that's that sort of 5 million a year for 5 years started to yield those kind of savings. That's my favorite part of this slide. That is pretty stunning, the power of harnessing the information for decision making. So why would we want to standardize? Because as we move to standards, it's helpful in the federal family. So we're Public Services and Procurement Canada, or Public Works Canada, and we're the corporate real estate manager who manages 27% of the floor space, which is a bit of a surprise. There's quite a few other federal custodians who own stuff. So we're the center of excellence, if you will, and we've got expertise that others knock on our door for help. But we manage just over a quarter directly of the real estate. Now, we manage most of the offices, but most of the stuff that isn't offices, that's not ours. So if we can go and if we can lead on standards, that really helps us help the others inside our federal family. Within our own portfolio, standards are useful too, because you can see that we have a mix. So there's the stuff that we manage. Some stuff we manage quite old school. We actually do the management ourselves. Some of it is under lease purchase deals, and some of it is leased. And in terms of actual management, we've got a variety of models that are employed for the management of the resources across that pie that you have there. So Finland mandated BIM back in 2001. Was a relatively small government. They could take a top-down approach and they could drive it more manageably within their system. The UK mandated it about 10 years after that. So again, bigger organization with their investment of £5 million a year. And there was a little bit more readiness. We come further down the road in that intervening decade. In Canada, what we're seeing really is more of a bottom-up approach, where we do have experts in pockets throughout our system who are saying, but look at this approach, look what we can do here, and see that research. So, in the lateness with which we join this global movement, it actually helps us create a third option, we think, which is if we all work together under a single banner to try to author a bit of a national direction. That would kind of be the home run if we could manage to do something like that in the world of a standard. So how do we do that? Well, as a federal organization, for us it's about enterprise-wide change. So within our own universe, but then within this broader federal family that I showed you on those pie charts a little while ago, we have to sort of do it for ourselves in a way that works for all of us. We're beginning to collect the data, and we're beginning to get the experience in enabling projects and turning on feedback loops that are going to enable us to really undertake enterprise transformation. And that's what we've seen when we've looked around the world in terms of how digital transformations often take place. So we would like to actually focus our efforts on adopting and sometimes adapting the lessons learned from others. However, it certainly allows for creativity and collaboration within Canadian subject matter expert organizations like Building Smart and Open Geospace Consortium. We can begin building standards, guidance, and tools we need to procure, manage, and analyze quality BIM. So our template, we look at it and we say, industry has already done a lot on this, so why would we go and try to reinvent the wheel? You've invested as a community, as a professional community, a lot of effort and a lot of work in designing a model that gets you to this point. It's really good work, and it's a deliberate decision that we're not going to try to figure out, our version of this. We're actually trying to use the work that's already out there from the industry, which again, maybe I hope that's kind of refreshing coming from government, that maybe we don't know best. On the left, you can see 6 stages, 6 streams that look pretty familiar: engagement, development, education, deployment, evaluation, and sustainability, for those of you who have seen this before. So where are we? We've got a little bit further to go. Admittedly, we're early on, and it depends as well, I could add, on which project. So we've got some marquee projects. Center Block on Parliament Hill is an example of one where we're all in on BIM, but other projects, or at the portfolio, or even at the sort of groupings of asset level, we're still working along. In terms of engagement, we've begun consultation and engagement with internal stakeholders, which includes, of course, our contracting authorities and our legal departments. If you can't get it right contractually, it's going to create problems. You can't really go out the door and engage industry in actually doing deals. We're talking to our owner investor functions who are responsible for that portfolio management. We're working with our strategic sourcing people, and these are the people who are looking at what are those next generation big contracts for how we manage our assets. We're looking to our IM and IT partners, because if we don't have the robust networks that we need, and communications technology, and even bandwidth, I mean, some of you will know very well, I'm sure, that BIM can chew up a lot of bandwidth. One of my team, who was doing a lot of really neat modeling to try to transform the way that we operated the precinct, I was making, I would say, monthly calls to our IT department on his behalf to try to get him more bandwidth. So when we've got a crunch for bandwidth in general inside some of our systems, if you're not going down the road with your IT partners, you're not going down that road very far, very fast usually. We're also reaching outside of our own little world to some other federal stakeholders who matter a lot, and those would include D&D and Defence Construction Canada. They are the largest federal custodian. The National Research Council of Canada, who actually, as you know, probably has a Centre of Excellence in Construction Technologies. The Standards Council of Canada, and we'll be reaching out to others soon as well. And we've begun engaging industry as well. It's a big priority for us. We've been working with FERPAC, we've been working with Building Smart Canada, and we've been working with ISO to figure out what does that path look like for us. It's a small portion of the contacts that we're adding to in this growing network as we try to pursue BIM a little bit more aggressively. And it's been made really clear that a platform of engagement or a community or a network together, formalizing that, that's going to be pretty important as we try to move down the road in a coherent way. In terms of education, we need training. It's going to be really important as we look at the way that we manage things in this sort of brave new tech-enabled world. We have relatively few subject matter experts internally. We have more than we used to, but we don't have as many as we need. So we do need qualified individuals to move us into the next phases, development, implementation. And we have to do some internal training while we're looking at new faces as well. Professional accreditation will matter a lot because we do have to have a standardized way of working so that we can work with each other, we can work with industry, we can work with other departments, other levels of government. It's a really clear priority for us that we need to, if we're moving down this road, it has to be based on a common approach. And managing information is really, it's about the knowledge economy. So you have to have technically savvy subject matter, people who know about the real property management, but people who know about it in this modern way, because it's such a significant transition, as you know. In terms of development, by developing some immediate tools and templates to address our current reality, our department is ensuring implementation of a phased change management approach because we don't want to disrupt the business too much. Technology is disruptive, but we have to keep things running at the same time. So while the Canadian AECOO community, it has the opportunity to reach a minimum level of maturity on the subject, we need to keep things running ourselves. So what you see on the screen there in black documents, these are the existing procurement documents that we usually use when we, in our common service provision model. So it's a general conditions contract and a project brief. They're just part of our current reality. But marked in red, you can see a component that we're beginning to add in through pilot projects, which is housed within BIM particular conditions and BIM specific tools and templates in our procurement and solicitation documents. And marked in blue, you can see that we have a planned future BIM standard guide that will help our project managers and our contracted facilities management organizations build in BIM requirements, as well as how we work with consultants to deliver on these kind of requirements. So we're starting down the road. For deployment, as I mentioned before a couple of times, we have a couple of examples right now. And Jody Eisner is going to be a part of the panel discussion later. He can talk a little bit about some of the things, the ways that we're looking at it locally. But the example that I think is well, it is literally, it's the biggest example in terms of complexity of project, size, dollars, all the rest of it, is Center Block, which is, again, it's the Peace Tower. It's that main building where the Library of Parliament is, where the House of Commons and the Senate sit. That project right now, Center Block is coming offline for 11 or 12 years, and BIM is the backbone on which that project is being driven. So it is our department's flagship project, and we're doing it in sort of a modern, digitally enabled way. So we're pretty excited about that. We're currently in year one of the roadmap, so we don't really have a yearly report scheduled to come out until the end of this year if you're looking to see our evaluation on how we're doing. So I guess the good news is I don't have so much to say on this slide. In terms of sustaining, though, we hope to maintain and sustain the program for a long time. And we want to do it in part by participating in discussions, panel discussions, or engaging industry at things like CanBIM events like this one. We're doing them all across the country. We're participating in them. Building Smart, standards, summits, and academic and professional association committees and meetings. So we're really happy to have been invited here today. I hope I haven't told you too many things that you already know. I don't see one person who's actively asleep now, so that's a good sign. But I'm well beyond time, so I'm gonna call it quits for there, and I may wind up seeing you a little bit later this evening. Thanks very much.